We will reach 40% in a couple of years, and now I'm doubling. Shall I put this away? I think. And we will reach even 80% in 2050. So we have to change our mobility culture. And what we face here, we can see that in the 1950s, in the 1960s, we are all living with few people in a world full of resources. And the preconditions for business and society have completely changed. We are now 8 billion, almost 8 billion people living in a world with limited resources. And this forces us to rethink the way we move ourselves. And how to do that? I think the first thing is we have to focus on distributive justice. If the planet wanted to live in peace, we have no chance to look on that issue, and we will invite later on a colleague who is really knowledgeable about this point from Africa in a few minutes. But we have also to find out what kind of mobility culture is desired by us, is acceptable for the planet in the long run, and will also assure access to opportunities for everyone on this planet. So we are not allowed to leave anyone behind anymore, but on the other side, we are also not allowed to let anybody go beyond the limits. And I think this is something where many, many cities have already showed that there are solutions out there. And we have to scale up these proven solutions. There's the 5-minute cities. Copenhagen was mentioned today several times. The 5-minute city in Copenhagen, where you can reach all your destinations within 5 minutes. And then we have France, Paris, who has the plan to make the 15 minutes city. Also, we have good examples in Germany, like Freiburg. And also, we have to identify the technological options, the appropriate ones. Not all technological innovations make sense, and maybe even more important, makes us happy. I think there's only one ministry in the world which is a ministry of happiness. This is the country of Bhutan, and we don't have it at the moment. So what is the menu for a sustainable community of the future? I think there are 5 key points. The first one is land use planning. We have to look for short distances, no segregations, and high livability. We need intelligent zero-emission mobility and also public transport. We need a widespread adoption of the sharing principle, and we need strong limits to use of ownership of private automobiles. Our individual mobility, we have heard it several times today by Felix Petersen as well, should be based on micro-units, micro-mobility, walking, and cycling. And maybe even more important than the technological innovations are the social innovations. And when we have seen the last months, we already learned that more collectivism is possible and less individualism. I think we can change our behavior, and this is very important. And we have also, and this is maybe the biggest challenge for all of us, we have to accept limits and rules. If we don't do that, we will go beyond that, and the Earth's overshoot day comes nearer and nearer. So our task as transport experts, there are many transport experts here. What shall we do? What is our mission? We should really act as multiplicators. I think many have understood what has to be done, and we need to act as multiplicators to convince others, to train the trainers, to teach the teachers, and so on. And we have also to moderate the process of the transformation, the Verkehrswende, and this we have to do with politics, with business and society. And finally, we have to think global, we have to learn from each other, and we have to listen to each other. And I am very happy that we are able to listen to somebody who is working in the field since very many years. This is Patrick Kayemba. Patrick Kayemba is the chairman of the first African Bicycle Information Office in Kampala, in Uganda, and he's also candidate for the Ugandan parliament. And I would like to welcome Patrick now. I don't know whether we can try to get him on stage in Zoom. There's Patrick.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Hello.
Yes, Patrick, welcome to the Shift Mobility Conference in Berlin. You are now live on stage, and we welcome you. Can you tell us a little bit how your candidate movement is going on? Can you hear us?
Yeah, thank you so much, and the conference makers for the
So we have 8,500 kilometers between here and Kampala, and there's some traffic jam in between.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. I was saying I'm really excited and I'm happy. I'm commending the conference makers for having allowed me to be part of this very, very critical discussion that is coming in at a time when we are actually living a new normal life other than the normal life that we're used to. So the dimension is a little different from the dimension that we have been used to. I hope my network will be very clear here because we just received very heavy rains here. And like Justice said, yes, I decided to contest to become a member of parliament with a vision of trying to influence, to change the policymakers, to go on the table that takes decisions. Because I've for long been in civil society trying to influence. You are also aware that we have been talking about issues of sustainable transportation, issues of green gas emissions, and these people have not taken it very, very serious.
Thank you, Patrick. I know you since very many years as a forerunner for sustainable transport, and I really wish that you make it to Parliament and maybe even make it to the Ministry of Transport so that we have the first African transport minister who's really an expert in sustainable mobility. Patrick, I have some questions for you. My first question is, you know, Patrick, that more than 90% of global mobility is running on fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And that the CO2 footprint of the Ugandans and the Africans is quite low. Now, what is your understanding of sustainable mobility? Should Africa has the right to use even more resources and produce more CO2 than richer regions, because it was vice versa in the last 100 years?
Yeah, thank you so much. Of course, the context that I'm going to explain, the African context, is a little different. One, because of the different challenges and the different perspectives of how transport is perceived by the different categories of people. You know, we have those that are well-to-do, we have experts, we have learners, we have, you know, those who have the money, who can afford to drive. But there are also those who are actually, when you give a bicycle, for example, it is really, really a symbol of welfare, of being happy and being able to access health services, access markets and all that. You know, that is the perspective of how Africa is looking at transport in most cases. However, it is also important to note that as a result of increased urbanization and as a result of increased population growth, actually the environment has actually changed. The context has changed. We have seen so many people who think that by having a car, when you have a car, then you are actually a better person in society. And actually when you don't have, when you're cycling or walking, then that means your social status in society is low. So that is a bit of dichotomy between the different categories of the population.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Patrick, you are talking about the high rates of urbanization in Africa, the high migration. And you also know that we transport X, we always say something about avoid, shift, improve. Now, Europe is, some in Europe, are focusing on self-driving cars with an expensive, complex, and sensitive digital infrastructure in our cities for moving goods and people. So, do you think these plans fit also to Africa so that Europe can export this new city mobility model as it did export the old model in the last years and decades?
Thank you so much. Of course, I can say it is yes and no. Where is the yes? The yes is the context of shift. The way you are European, the way you perceive shift is not the way that I want to explain shift. We want, you know, the challenge is within the mindset of our people, the mindset of our planners, the mindset of the engineers that are making the roads. So if we are talking about shifting, we need to influence and make sure that we have different ways of training our workers, training our planners, urban planners, to shift from a monopolistic point of view. Because all these policymakers who have gone to school, they have actually been nurtured through a process of looking at motor vehicles, looking at moving and making roads for cars other than making roads for people. Many of the people would actually prefer coming up with parking yards for vehicles and without creating a specific, for example, infrastructure for bicycles. So that's the shift that I'm talking about. But also improve. How do we now improve? By maybe exporting some bit of expertise or being able to import or get some knowledge on how the training of our planners, training of our engineers can actually be able to improve, to accommodate and be holistic to ensure that sustainable transport is actually taken as sustainable transport. Our transport courses are motoristic oriented, which is a bit of a challenge at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. You are talking about the specific mindset in Africa. And Heiner Monheim just mentioned 5 minutes ago, we should Copenhagenize the world. And my question is, Copenhagenize African cities. You know, your president just said that he should have focused much more on cycling, as the president sees it's very resilient and assures mobility and access for all, even on Corona times. Now, my question is, about mindset, does the African civil society really want such a development, cycling cities? Where are the barriers for less car-oriented developments in Africa?
Of course, for the last time, First African Bicycle Information Organization, for over 20 years, have been actually pushing government, have been advocating for government, for improved and sustainable transport. So civil society have a big role. In Uganda now, we have a non-motorized transport policy, which was as a result of a civil society role to play to catalyze the different local governments, but also the central governments to come up with policies that are holistic and that are actually democratic. Democratic means that we are taking care of the minority, infrastructure of the minority, other than actually working and coming up with the infrastructure for the majority who are cycling, who are walking, who want to actually have good life, for us to have livable cities, productive cities, and safe cities. Here, making our cities cycling friendly have two dimensions that we have been talking about as far. One, creating pilot projects that are actually talking about infrastructure that are safe, segregated lanes, but also safety for the bicycle itself. If you are able to cycle your bike from one point to another or to a workplace, can you be able to keep your bike safe? But also about your safety on the road. So the dimensions are a bit different. However, we have started on that. Fabio, together with UN Habitat, have come up, and Urist, by the way, have come up with pilot projects in Kampala. At the moment, we have about 7 to 10 kilometers that we are trying to see how we can be able to improve NMT infrastructure, cycling lanes, that we can then showcase to the planners and policymakers to adopt.
Thank you, Patrick. You are talking about the role of your CSO, the role of NGOs. But when it comes to responsibilities, who's responsible to educate and sensitize business and society to develop a common vision about the mobility on your continent? Who should that be? And who can take over ownership?
Of course, the primary responsible person is government. Because our governments, both central and local, are given resources. They collect taxes from citizens, and they have the responsibility to change and make society better for citizens. Create livable cities, create good life for their citizens. So if they are to do that, the primary responsibility is actually government. However, the civil society cannot just sit back and look, and when government is doing nothing, the academicians have a big role to ensure that they actually have to improve their training modules in a way that can be able to actually add value to ensuring that the people that are coming out of schools and also carrying out research, and at the same time trying to see how to link with expertise in the north, so that south-north relationship can actually be able to improve. So the responsibility is almost towards the entire to be put in Fabio to ensure the NMT policy. But even when the NMT policy is there, implementation of that policy requires still advocacy and allocation of resources. So it's a bit dynamic, and it requires a dynamic society.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Maybe just to brief the audience here that NMT policy means non-motorized transport policy, and Uganda is the only country on the African continent who has a non-motorized policy as a national policy document, and it is based on Patrick's work in the last 10, 15 years. So Patrick, let's hope that you really make it to Parliament in the coming months. I have a final question to you. What can Europe do? How can a cooperation between Africa and Europe, Europe and Africa can look like? What is your desire?
Thank you so much. Of course, Europe and Africa are both important to each other. They actually complement each other. Because there is quite a lot of value in terms and richness in terms of culture, and there's also quite a lot of capacity that maybe could have been built in the north. So it is important, if we are to grow and come up with a holistic globe, a holistic society, regardless whether in Europe or in Africa, it is important to actually share, and for Europe to appreciate the context in which Africa is, and in a way to be able to provide maybe transfer of expertise, because looking at the challenges of Africa and also looking at the opportunities there is that can be tapped to ensure that we, at the end of the day, because you know that Africa is the way it is, because Europe is the way it is in one way or the other. And the effects of globalization, effects of green gas emissions, you know, even when we do not pollute much, the effects of pollution affects us even much more. It's a arrangement where there's need to appreciate, which is very, very, very critical for all of us to then enjoy this world, whether in Africa or in Europe, because the world it's important for us to have a unified world for purposes of equity.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. I think we have learned that there is a lot of connectivity between Europe and Africa, specifically when it comes to transportation policies. We have exported our mobility light build, our mobility structures to many, many countries outside Europe. And now we are to a certain extent also responsible for the traffic jam you are suffering in. We have to change that. And we have also to listen, of course, to the demand in your cities and in your communities. Patrick, thank you very much. I think
thank you so much.
Our moderator has also no further question.
I'm still waiting for any question.
Patrick, so we have clarified the main issues. We could continue for hours, I think, and I hope you will be able to come to Europe and I can come to Uganda one day in future so that we really can exchange in person. The internet connection was a little bit interrupted, but everybody could probably get something from what you have said. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your commitment to sustainable transport. And greetings to Kampala, Uganda.
Thank you so much also, Jürgen, and the conference makers for allowing me to share my thinking. And I've been following whatever, and also for the experts, I'm happy that I have also added value to my knowledge. I thank you so much, and I wish you good.
Thank you. Dankeschön.